mistakes are the main way that we can elicit our own neuroplasticity once we reach like our mid-20s. Our neuroplasticity, the way that our brain changes, the main way that we can proactively elicit it is when the brain makes a prediction that turns out to be wrong, and then it reconfigures. And so that's how important mistakes are. But mistakes also lower performance, right? If you're like performing in a high stakes match or in a high stakes, yogurt rollout, you want to try to minimize mistakes. And so being clear about, again, when do we want to be in the learning zone and when do we want to be in the performance zone? In the performance zone, we're trying to minimize mistakes. And how are we going to elicit mistakes? So we can think about 4 different kinds of mistakes. One is the stretch mistakes, which is the mistakes we make when we are in our learning zone, trying things that may or may not work. We're experimenting. We're trying something that might or might not work. We want to have a lot of those mistakes, but we want to do it in times and spaces that are safe, both psychologically safe and also physically safe, where we're not going to hurt anybody. So we want to identify when those times are. There's the second kind of mistake is the high stakes mistakes, which is mistakes that do cause harm, and whether it's in our revenues or physical harm. And so we want to minimize those. And we do that by being clear that at those times we're going to be in our performance zone, whether we are driving a school bus or packing a parachute, right? Or like in charge of a nuclear plant. We don't want to make mistakes. We want to try to avoid it, right? Number 3 is the sloppy mistakes, which are mistakes we make that we should have known better. And often these mistakes are not important. I like to, if I can, if it's not important, I like to laugh about them, take a picture, share it with friends or family so that they can laugh too. But sometimes the sloppy mistakes do create damage. And so when that happens, in any mistake, we can reflect and think about, what can I learn from this mistake? And what can I do differently going forward to avoid this mistake? And with sloppy mistakes, if we want to avoid them in the future, we often surface opportunities to foster more focus or to change our systems so that we don't kind of make mistakes in the periphery. Often we're focused on one thing and we make a mistake on something that we weren't focused on. So how can I change my systems to avoid that mistake is something that often is a conclusion. It's like if I spill my smoothie all over myself, which sometimes I have done, I take a picture, I have a good time. But if I want to avoid that in the future, then I might kind of change where in my desk I put the glass, right? So that's going to avoid the mistake in the future. And the 4th kind of mistake is the aha moment mistake, which is when we do something as we intended, but then we realize it was the wrong thing to do. So we have an aha moment. Like if my spouse is upset, I go to her trying to console her and I problem solve to figure out how to solve the problem. And she says, I don't need problem solving right now. I don't want problem solving. I just want you to be with me and empathize with me. That's an aha moment mistake. Okay, I did what I meant to do, which is problem solve, and I realized that was the wrong thing to do. So with aha moment mistakes, we can't elicit them as proactively as stretch mistakes, which we can elicit by taking on challenges and going beyond the known. But when they happen, when aha moment mistakes happen, we want to treasure those because they're really very precious opportunities for learning. So we want to pay attention to it and think about what I can learn from this. And we can surface aha moment mistakes by soliciting feedback. When we solicit feedback, we give the other person the opportunity to share things that we didn't know, we didn't have in mind, and that can surface aha moments as well.